Hello and welcome everyone to Placemaking Nepal's international webinar on places people love. Firstly, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Niharika Mathema. I am an architect, placemaker and urban rejuvenator, and also the initiator of Placemaking Nepal. And we have our technical coordinator, Suprema Joshi. She is an associate of Placemaking Nepal. So Placemaking Nepal is an emerging network. It is a self-organized collective of placemakers, of public space enthusiasts dedicated to creating meaningful places for memorable experiences. So I'll be serving you as a moderator today, and on behalf of Placemaking Nepal, I welcome you all again to this event. So let me just briefly walk you through the structure of today's event. So we have brought together world-class thought leaders and placemaking experts from around the globe, and they will be sharing with us some valuable insights on various pressing urban topics that are focused on how we can better design, shape, and manage our public spaces to ensure livability, sustainability, vitality, and provide the best living conditions for people. We shall be covering 6 different topics and themes in today's masterclass. And I assure that our audience members will be exposed to a rich and diverse viewpoints from different professional areas. And you will definitely have something enriching or maybe even inspiring to take back with you at the end of today's session. To make sure that we are helping you as best as we can on today's topics, we have a chat box to source your questions. So please feel free to drop any questions for our speakers, and they shall be answered at the end of the session today. So the last 15 minutes here belong to our audience. And if you ask a question, please make sure that you direct it to a particular speaker. And in order not to disturb the course of today's webinar, please communicate only via chat. So great, then without any further ado, I'd like to start the session today. So please join me in welcoming our first panel speaker, Ethan Kent. He is the Executive Director of PlacemakingX, a network to accelerate placemaking for global impact. And he builds on more than 2 decades of experience working with local communities on public space projects and campaigns. So today he's going to talk to us about the basic ideas and concepts of placemaking and about the evolution of this movement. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ethan Kent. So Ethan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Eureka, and everyone, and for organizing this, Suprema, and your colleagues in Nepal. So honored to get to meet everyone, and really thrilled with the great turnout and leadership of placemaking leaders from around the world supporting this emerging Placemaking Nepal network. Really, I've been inspired for a long time by Niharika's work in writing, her great articles in I think it's the Kathmandu Times, that really were describe placemaking and public space issues in ways that are relevant to all cultures, but particularly excited about how we'll learn from how you apply these ideas in Nepal, how they the importance. I've traveled. I haven't been in Nepal. It's a dream to go there someday. I've actually traveled and worked in India and in Tibet, in sort of the region, and we're excited that there's a lot of momentum for placemaking in the region. Probably the fastest growing area of interest. And there's a new network in Bangladesh that's just been launched. There's a woman in Bhutan that's starting a network. There's a woman in Mongolia as well, and Pakistan, and then several in Southeast Asia and Singapore, all offering great innovation to the placemaking conversation, and also having certain challenges and needs that we all want to figure out how to better address. So this networked approach to learning, to collective advocacy, and then collective impact is the idea behind PlacemakingX and behind all these different networks. So I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see. Great, so you can see that now. And so share a little more about the placemaking movement and sort of where this all came from. and really excited for many other placemaking experts to fill in other parts of this as well. But placemaking really emerged from a focus on making public spaces work for people. But in many ways, and we started to use the term in the 90s, and I'll give more history later, when we realized the best way to make it work for people is to make it work by people, have it be shaped by the people, the experts in that community, and that everyone that knows a public space and uses it well are actually experts in how that space works. We just often have to ask them the right questions, inspire them a little bit, inform them a little bit sometimes. But everyone's passionate about public spaces and often has great ideas for how they can be improved. Indeed, the places that people most love around the world are places that have been shaped by and for people. Unfortunately, around the world, the focus on building cities has been around anything but that, has been around building objects, around moving traffic through a city, around narrower economic goals, often degrading the lovability of cities. And so I'm really inspired by the name of this event, Places People Love, because it really cuts at the core of the potential for turning upside down the shaping of cities to start with places people love. And it sounds soft to some people, perhaps, but I really believe that focusing on lovability, people's attachment to place, the care that they have for the place and the people in it, actually can very effectively achieve livability more inclusively, more affordably, more quickly. When people are attached to a place, they invest in it in ways that give back to it. They create these virtuous feedback loops of co-creation of space that anchor local economies, create value, help people support each other in many ways outside of the monetary economy, but also really attach the parts of the broader economy that are most important that are most culturally connected, that are most frankly efficient. And so it's these culturally loved places where innovation of all kinds occurs, where the local economy, local culture, and strong social bonds are formed, that form the foundation of this successful civilization, really. And certainly Nepal is known for creating these lovable places, but how they're created is often not understood. So unpacking how the places that people most loved is important, and then applying them in new ways and enabling people to love them in new ways and contribute to them in new ways is potentially a challenge for this network. But a little bit of background on PlacemakingX. We're a network to accelerate placemaking for global impact, to connect people coming to this conversation from many different demographics, disciplines, cultural contexts as well, and different sectors. And we think placemaking is most successful when it's not dominated by any one discipline. It's not architects that do it, or activists, or government. It's a range of different groups, and we're really excited, most inspired by the regional networks that like Placemaking Nepal now, that have been leading placemaking. Some of these for over a decade, some of them quite recent, and I encourage you to look at their websites, their social media, connect, follow them. Each one is leading and inspiring in different ways, different strengths and weaknesses. And Placemaking Nepal, I'm excited to add to this group now, as you really are establishing yourselves. Placemaking Bangladesh has also just recently launched, and we'll add them to the core group. But you can connect on the PlacemakingX website. You can connect to link to each of these and follow them on social media, engage with them on social media. A lot of the activity of networks is very much supported by the social media collaboration, highlighting each other's work, connecting from it, etc. And so we're seeing not only are there important cross-cutting, important regional networks, but we're seeing cross-cutting networks and topics as well. And the placemaking movement is connecting with leaders in the environmental movement, in the local food movement, in health and equity and inclusion, and showing how a focus on place can sometimes disrupt and reconnect different movements. It also can enable collaboration and resourcefulness in ways that focusing on just on one solution set or one problem prevents. So we see place as not a competing cause or movement, but one that ultimately grounds and enables innovation in many. We see it as underlying and enabling the systemic change that we need to create new systems of governance, of participation, of collaboration at all scales. You know, whether this is in front of our homes, on our block, in our street corners, in a neighborhood, or citywide, place and placemaking are enabling new models of informal and formal governance, economic, financing systems, and broader sort of cultural participation systems as well. So, but the future of cities right now is at a sort of juncture, let's say, and a lot of the vision that people have is a sort of monoculture where cities are starting to look the same, and they're more defined by objects and experiences that we consume rather than co-create. And this vision is even sold sometimes as environmental or as inclusive or as creative, when really it's preventing people from really being able to shape and participate in the co-creation of their public realm. So we think if you lead with design and development, even if it's sort of good design and development, that you just get more of that. It's still perpetuating the same system. It's still a narrow solution set that degrades the capacity of communities ultimately. And this is a beautiful building, perhaps, but this idea that just hiring a fancy architect and spending a lot of money on an iconic building alone is limits, and it often puts down the cultural creativity of people around it. And there's people actually mugged a tourist couple right after I took this picture. So it didn't create a safe space or an active place. It wasn't a place for and by the people that live in that city, in this case, Bilbao, Spain. So if you lead with cars and traffic, you get more cars and traffic. Perhaps the biggest limiting factor to good public spaces and placemaking is how we've planned our cities for transportation. Actually just published an article on the Social Life Project that really goes deep into this topic, and how we can really turn it upside down, and how even the most progressive approaches to transportation planning and sort of tactical urbanism are not quite going far enough in terms of the systemic change to the process of how we shape transportation and the governance of how we manage our public realm and right of ways. So around the world, where especially in quote developing countries, the traffic is having an important, really scary impact on social life, on the economic activity of streets. Of course, it's as bad as anywhere here in New York, or this is right outside New York City and New Jersey, where you drive around more and more and you accomplish less and less. It's literally degrading the very lovability of the most, of our communities. It's a direct affront to places people love. And some of my early projects were in New York, turning around Times Square, going right to the heart of sort of how the auto culture was being allowed to define the centers of our cities. And we did temporary changes that led to permanent changes. But again, often the informal, lower cost changes had the biggest impact, made people feel welcome in the space, made it so you could never change it, but also informed and created demand for longer term change. But we often sometimes the informal spaces, the low cost ones, are better than the more expensive spaces that happen later on. So allowing people to take over their public realm and shape it and debate who uses it and who can use it often unleashes great creativity. In Nairobi, we've been part of several placemaking weeks that ultimately led to closing the street more permanently. But it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't done these sort of temporary, more informal changes to begin with. One of our biggest impacts when I was at Project for Public Spaces, a project my father, Fred Kent, led, was the center of Detroit. And right when the city was declaring bankruptcy, and they really had made every planning mistake in the book, defined their city entirely around cars and traffic and big corporations. We helped them put a beach right at the center of the city, a very informal, low-cost space that then created sort of a ripple effect of people starting to shape that city again and reclaim it for locals, and then invite in tourists and new investment on the terms of locals. So this is in Mexico City. One of the leaders of PlacemakingX and Placemaking Mexico created this project with us that is first about connection and sociability. And there was an earthquake here, and the connections, they told the story of how the social capital that's built through these places built resilience for that community. So William White was actually my father's mentor, someone I knew a little bit as well. It was really laid the foundation along with Jane Jacobs for placemaking, and a lot of the thinking that is behind it. And I know, Niharika's written about both of them. There's a new biography about William White that's really nice to read. He said it's hard to create a space that will not attract people. What's remarkable is how often this has been accomplished. And this is a project in Boston that was copying this space in Siena in Italy, but of course copied only the form, not the process and the management. And they've been trying to retrofit it. They've hired many Harvard educated architects to try to fix it over many years, and it never worked. So it just goes to further prove that it's not a design solution alone. Placemaking needs a broader set of solutions to inform and drive demand for good design, actually. So we shape our public spaces thereafter. They shape us. We don't realize how we shape them, but even more so, we don't realize how they shape us, how they create how we feel about ourselves, each other, our culture, how they shape our behavior, our health, in really every way. So we have to be so much more conscious and caring about how we shape our public realm. This is a picture my father took 30, 40 years ago, and I was lucky to go back to Sydney right before the pandemic and see how they finally have reshaped this space so people can cross it. So there's a movement now. This is in Auckland, New Zealand, where spaces are allowing connection again, and they're actually pedestrianizing the center of this city as well, so to allow people to connect and be together, and to create lovability with each other, to make places that people love also enable people to love each other. So what is placemaking? We think it's useful because it's a fuzzy word that it is sort of a made-up word. Frankly, we really just started using it in the 90s. It had been used a little bit here and there, but it's part of placemaking is a process of debating what it means, who does it, who is it for, making sure it isn't dominated by any one user group, and the definition keeps evolving in many ways. But perhaps we see it as a collaborative process by which we shape our public realm in order to maximize shared value. It's also a strengthening of the connection between people and the places they share. There was an MIT study that actually found that the biggest benefit of placemaking wasn't the improved place, but the improved social capital through the process of placemaking. So again, the process is key and enables a great unfolding. There are much better solutions than are possible at the beginning of it, because the process builds capacity for deeper change. It attracts the resources, the expertise, the ideas that become contagious in a sense. It's a good virus that great places beget great places and create more capacity for people to continue to create places together. I mentioned some of this, and some of this is on our website too, the history. But yeah, we have roots, working with Jane Jacobs and William White. My father worked with both of them on something called the Street Life Project. And then my father founded Project for Public Spaces in 1975. And then we started calling it placemaking in the 90s. And we started seeing it going really internationally, working to set up placemaking NGOs actually in Central Europe in sort of early 2000s. And we started to really launch it, to really focus on building a movement around 2013 with UN Habitat, and get we launched a campaign to get public spaces and placemaking principles into the New Urban Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals, which we succeeded at by 2016. And we really helped to sort of focused on building these regional networks in the last 3 or 4 years. We tried to launch one in Wuhan, actually in China in 2018. It isn't going that great, but there's a good declaration from that that is maybe relevant for people there. But we're seeing how the movement, just like good placemaking, is really about allowing people to self-organize. The movement should be defined by people on the ground, dealing with everyday challenges. And so we've designed PlacemakingX to really be bottom up, just the way a good placemaking process is. When we launched the placemaking movement building effort in 2013, this was the key idea that everyone has the right to live in a great place, but more importantly, everyone has the right to contribute to making the place where they already live great. And these were some of the conferences that we helped organize with local partners, and there's many more now. Again, all these are linked on the PlacemakingX website under events, and you can read the reports and videos from all these conferences and more recent ones as well as a resource. So the mission of PlacemakingX is to be a global network of leaders who together accelerate placemaking as a way to create healthy, inclusive, and beloved communities. And our vision is to make the spaces we live into places we love, to create a thriving, equitable, sustainable world through the convergence of values, passion, and action around our public spaces. So just a handful more slides, but we often recommend that the regional networks and the sort of city campaigns have a three-pronged approach. That there's advocacy for public spaces for placemaking, to make the case, and Niharika's done a great job with some of her writing on that. And it's also about amplifying the stories, the leadership, connecting people that are doing this, that are often sort of isolated or alone, or great projects that are already happening. And then, of course, about how do we accelerate impact? What are the cross-cutting issues that need to be addressed to accelerate impact? How do we get small grants? How do we get government foundations and activists to be able to start to change public spaces and then further tell those stories? How do we then move that back into the amplifying and advocacy for deeper change and broader impact? And of course, how do we scale this at all levels? So how do we start with one place, adding 10 things to do in a place in front of our home or a public institution? How do we create a destination that has 10 places in it that really each with 10 things to do in it? And then looking at a city or a region with to have great have at least 10 great public destinations or districts. And then a country like Nepal, how can it have 10 great cities or regions? Not necessarily big ones. You can have them be small. How do you apply this in rural areas? It's just as important. It's often rural people are often better at this, and it's easier to have an impact on a small place that people really love, can really change the whole perception, participation in a region. And of course, now there's a Placemaking Asia network on Facebook that we encourage you to be part of and share with. And there's really good collaboration between the different Asian and there's networks. It's also a South Asian Facebook group as well. So placemaking, times Nepal, you guys are, it's not just about making Nepal work. It's you guys are at the center of the world there. You're at the top of the world in many ways. So we look to you for leadership. We were inspired by what you've done. And you're already having global impact. And the globe, everyone wants to help you as well. So, ask for help. We're all here to learn this together, challenge everyone. But it's a small group of people, like your emerging network in Nepal that can change the world. You're at the nexus of the continent, at the nexus of many different issues and challenges that your country is facing. And you can bring them together and enable deeper capacity for change to solve your country's challenges. So we're here to help in any way we can. And there's a conference, just a Placemaking India conference at the very beginning of December. I think I'm going to be there, and several other leaders from around the world will be there. Hope to see you there, or maybe we can add on a trip to Nepal to that. but looking forward to questions in the chat later on, and looking forward to really thrilled by, you have some amazing speakers that you brought together from the PlacemakingX network and some others that I'm excited to hear from. So thank you so much for all the work to put on this great event and to create Placemaking Nepal, and we're here to work with you in the long run. So thank you.